I'm McNeill. I'm an indie game developer working on VR stuff out of San Diego. So my first project was Darknet, which is a cyberpunk hacking game that is out now on the Gear VR. My second project is Tactera, which is a virtual tabletop real-time strategy game, which I just built for the mobile VR Jam and am looking at turning into a full title. And both of those hopefully are going to be coming out to the PC-based VR platforms whenever the hardware becomes available. Since I released the Darknet Gear VR version, I'd always been planning on building out like an expanded PC version, and I've kind of just started on like the real meat and potatoes of that. I've done some design work. I have a good idea of how it's going to be expanded, a couple new features, a lot of new twists to the puzzles, trying to keep things fresh and sort of add more value to the game to the people who are getting into it for the first time, as well as just making it prettier and taking advantage of the extra horsepower that we have on PC. Releasing on Gear VR was pretty difficult, I'd say, to begin with. Getting it done in time for the launch was pretty hard, and I was proud that Darknet was one of the first full games that was available, especially because the store hadn't released by then, so it didn't make sense for most people to put anything out that was the majority of their content. So it's been a while since then. I feel like it's there's been more time, more stuff has come out. Darknet has some peers, and there's some really great stuff on the Gear VR store right now. And it's been a good experience, but I'd say it almost feels like the game hasn't yet launched. Oculus has said that the consumer launch of the Gear VR is still coming in this fall. Until then, it's a very small install base. It almost feels like sort of a preview version, and I guess that's the point of making it the Innovator Edition. But it feels like almost like the real launch is coming up this fall, and I hope to actually take some of the expanded features I'm building for the PC version and include those in the Gear VR version. So it's sort of like the expanded Darknet that'll be coming out then. So since I started charging for the Gear VR, which happened in March, there was a little delay before we started getting statistics, and then we did start getting statistics, and the way I characterize sales is low, but as expected. As I said, there's a very small install base, and then the other X factor for Darknet is I had released the full game for free for 3 months before it went up for sale. So most of the people who had Gear VRs got the full game for free. I'm happy with that. I'm glad they played it. Oculus has told me that the numbers for average playtime have been very good for Darknet, and so in that sense I feel like it's sort of fulfilled its goals. It's kind of made a name for itself in its own small way, and I'm hoping that that'll pay dividends when that full consumer launch comes up this fall, but we'll see. I don't really know. So when Oculus Touch comes out, I fully expect to be able to integrate it in some way. I don't know the details of that yet. With Tactera, I definitely see a lot of potential for getting your hands in there, because everything's happening in very close quarters, and the game's designed for that. With Darknet, it was more designed around the sort of the limitations of VR in its earliest days, because that's when it came to be. So things happen further away. It's a pretty simple control scheme. There's not a lot of stuff that you would just reach out and touch. So although I definitely would include support for Oculus Touch, and motion controls like for Morpheus and Vive, I don't see it fundamentally changing the game for Darknet in the way that I would for something like Tactera or other games. So Tactera started out actually as a little prototype that I made for a hackathon back in January or February, I think, maybe even further back than that. But it was a 23-hour prototype that I just built in one blitz, and I think it worked out really well. It was it was not the same game, but it was kind of playing around with that format of things are happening on a table in front of you. You select and deploy where your troops go. They go and clash, and so the mechanics sucked, the art sucked, there was no sound whatsoever. It was very, very bare bones, but it kind of inspired me to say, yeah, I could make a full game. I could make something real out of this. So when the VR Jam was announced, I decided I wanted to make a new project that was taking that idea and making something real out of it. And so that's what I did. I spent, from the time the VR Jam was announced and Oculus said, get started, I got started, and that was kind of just what I did for the next 2 months. It's turned out well, I think, and so I'm probably going to be putting more time into it. You know, splitting my time between that and Darknet PC, I think that's going to keep me very busy right up until the PC consumer hardware starts coming out, and I really want to have this stuff available. So Tactera, like Darknet, is inspired by sort of scenes from movies, and like Darknet, it doesn't have a specific inspiration. You know, actually a lot of the movies that everyone says Darknet is similar to, I hadn't actually seen until I had gotten well into the project. And the same is kind of true of Tactera, where it's inspired by kind of this trope of like a holographic command table, you know, where there's like little holographic things moving around and you can see the whole battlefield at once. I know that that's shown up in, you know, things like Prometheus or TV shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and things like that. But I can't tell you specifically any one of those that actually like was my inspiration. It was just sort of this kind of feeling of a trope that's in the air, that's something I know I'd seen before, that I thought was cool, that was kind of a staple of sci-fi that I wanted to play with, that I wanted to sort of build out in a way that made sense as a game. Tactera definitely, I think, lends itself to multiplayer, so for a full version I think that's going to be one of the critical features. I've never done multiplayer before. It can be very difficult, especially for something with a small install base where it's not sure if, you know, other people are going to be online. That's going to pose some serious challenges. But in a lot of other ways, Tactera is perfect for multiplayer. You know, it's an RTS where like there's delays in just the right spots so that you can sort of sync up the games in a way that should be pretty seamless. And it would be great, I think, to see the other player in the game, even if it's just as sort of like a puppeteered, you know, head of looking around and like seeing where they're looking on the board, you know, and seeing your opponent looking across the way from you. I think as soon as I put in a feature like that, people would use it to try to troll the other player by like walking into their view or something like that. So I'd have to police that as well. But I think there's a lot of promise there, and it's something I look forward to exploring. I just started Tactera, so I think it's a little early for me to be thinking about future projects. I don't want to commit to anything, and I've already started turning down, you know, new opportunities. That said, you know, it's kind of a classic, you know, flaw of a lot of game designers that you can't stop having ideas. Like, things are going to keep bubbling up, and there's always the possibility that one of them is going to be so exciting that I have to make room for it somehow. We'll see if I'm able to. I mentioned having to turn down some opportunities. It's not so much, you know, that I'm referring to like companies that are going out and trying to hire me or something like that, but I think there's a lot of people who are interested in, you know, their organization getting into Gear VR or some sort of virtual reality project that, you know, their company wants to be involved with, and they're looking for contracting help. And so there's a lot of actually VR developers who need that sort of work. And you know, I'm very lucky to be in a place where I can like afford to spend 6 months or a year just building my own game and putting it out in the world, hoping it does well. But I think that, you know, contracting work is going to be really important, really useful, and like a very valid path for a lot of developers. So I make a point, you know, whenever I have to turn something down, of saying, but I know lots of people who can help with that, and sort of passing it around. I think that's one of the advantages to having a VR community is, you know, that's good for everybody if you're able to say, you know, even if I can't help, there's lots of talented people that I can point you towards.